Survival Worldwide is back on Reality Pop. I am your host, Chris Swanepoel, and with me today, as always, we've got our co-host, Riley. Riley, how have you been since I last spoke to you in regards to Australian Survivor?
Yeah, still recovering from this last episode of Survivor South Africa Immunity Island. So crazy, so much chaos going on at Tribal Council that, I mean, Australian Survival is crazy enough, but this episode is just taking it to a whole new other level. My mind's just all over the place trying to think, where are we going now that we're about 3 weeks away from the finale? It's just crazy.
Yeah, and I look forward to hearing your takes on this episode. I have got my own very hot takes about this episode, and dare I say, Jake, this might be one of the best international Survivor seasons we've seen in a long time, maybe up there in the top 3 or something of all time. And that's maybe me personally being Brit biased. And it's really good to have you here, Jake, to tell us what you thought of this season so far. It's always good to have a US perspective on it, since you guys have had the show for 40 seasons there. It's always interesting to know what you guys think of the international versions of the show. Would you say I'm kind of on the money in regards to this being an all-time great season, or where do you rank it personally?
I know you're a huge Chappies fan, Chris, and I am as well. So just the fact that he's still in the game at this point and had this insane episode, I would have to agree with you. This is one of the best.
Yeah, I think for me, I've been a massive Chappies fan throughout, early on in the show, throughout right now, everything he's doing. Do I think Chappies is playing the best game this season? I don't know about that, but is he entertaining, and is he giving me everything that I want within a Survivor season? 100%. And another player that, is playing, I think, a very, very good game, or have been playing a very good game, and she's impressed both myself and Riley so much throughout the season, is Santoni. I mean, the fact that she's been able to jump back and forth and be this in-between person in alliances and things like that, it's just crazy to me how she's gotten so deep into the game. What have you thought about Santoni so far this season, and especially that relationship that both Chappies and Santoni has? Because they're probably two of the bigger characters to come from the Survivor South Africa franchise, and they just so happen to also work together.
I love the duo between them. I think a final 2 of Chappies and Santoni is like the dream at this point. And I think that their relationship is really interesting. And I think Chappies and Santoni just have had really interesting relationships with pretty much everyone. Like Chappies and Anesu's partnership. And then now he's like dedicating his whole like revenge tour to her. And he was like, heard her voice when he was in the immunity challenge. I mean, I think they're freaking entertaining, and I would love to see them both in the final 2.
It's interesting because we never really saw Anesu's relationship with Chappies to that degree in the show. I mean, I always picked up on it early in the season, Riley, where I was pointing out whenever Anesu was saying, hey, pass a message on to Chappies to let him know I'm still with him. We see her and Chappies talk quite early within the show. But clearly this relationship was a lot bigger than what the show ever showed us. I mean, she's willing to give her tribal council pass to him as she walks out, which is going to form a big part of this episode. And even in the tribal council here, you can just see that she's loving everything Chappies brings to the table. Every time he speaks, she's got this massive smile on her face. She is going to be one of his biggest defenders, I think, when it comes to final tribal council. If Chappies was to actually make it to that point, I think she's going to try and fight the case for him to potentially get a win. And I've heard comments online about Chappies not having a social game, and some of the things that he's doing in this episode, and it's interesting because we'll talk about that as well. But clearly he had some sort of a social game to be able to get Santoni to want to play with him, to be able to get Tyson to play an idol on him at a certain point within the game, even though strategically also have benefited Tyson's game at that point. And then also with Anesu, he's had this big social game that is sort of carrying over even now that she's voted out of the game.
Yeah, that's right. And Chappies has really been on the bottom from the beginning of the game. So to get this far to the final 6 now is ridiculous to see him still in the game, because he's a massive physical threat. He's had all these advantages along the way. And to still be standing despite being on the bottom at, basically almost every vote. It's ridiculous that he's still here. If he reaches the final 2 with Santoni, it's going to be an absolutely crazy journey to the end. Look, do I think either of them can win at this point, given their relationship with the jury? It's going to be hard to tell, and it would certainly depend on who that third person at Final Tribal Council is. But so far, Chappies is serving so much entertainment, so many big strategies, and some great physicality and challenges as well.
Now, guys, for those that are in the live chat with us today, I did put a sort of poll out there in the beginning of this to say, will Chappies still be able to win this game if he does get to the end, or did this last episode sink his chances in regards to getting there to the end? And I can see that at the moment it's sitting at 67% of people saying that he can still win this game, even after the performance in this last episode. There is also quite a few people here in the chat that are saying that they really do like Chappies. Dolores, welcome to the live show. She says, hi, guys, this is actually my first season an essay and I'm loving it. I'm all on board for Chappies, although Amy was my favorite. We all loved Amy. I think both myself and Riley said Amy is a player that I think that she could easily come back, and being voted out without any votes, paired destinies, or tied destinies. Jake, what did you think of that twist as a US Survivor fan watching it?
It kind of seems like something US Survivor would do. You kind of think, especially South Africa, is more tame nowadays with their twists. And especially with this episode, there were 4 advantages, like the immunity island with Nicole being immune and couldn't vote. There was the tribal council pass. There was the idol that Santoni used on herself. Although I didn't feel like it was too much because of the characters kind of dominating the episode with just all the drama with Chappies and Tyson and Warda. But I would say I wasn't a fan of it for sure, the tied destinies, especially because it took out Amy, who had no votes the entire season. And she was my winner pick after the first episode. So that definitely stung. Wasn't really a big fan of that.
100%. Chris Dixon here in the chat. Chris, welcome to the live as well. To be honest, I think Chappies has possibly been outwitted a few too many times to definitely win if he makes it to the end. And he's had a very interesting. I can't put my full feelers on his edit. Now, I know Riley doesn't like talking too much about the edit. I love getting into the edit. I love talking about the little things that I see within an edit. And the thing that always sort of amazes me about Chappies is that Chappies, if they wanted to bury him this season, they had all the ammunition to bury him and make him the villain. Why has the producers chosen not to make Chappies the villain this season? Because, everybody clearly had some sort of a dislike for him around camp. He was enemy number 1 going into the merge. They could have easily painted him in a way where it looked like he was this macho, douchey guy that nobody got along with, but they clearly show, in the beginning when he helps Santoni when she's struggling in the water. They clearly show when, he saves half of his tribe in the challenge. They show him wait at the podium for people to finish eating their food. They go out of their way to show the kind things that he's doing throughout the season, even though he is being selfish as well at certain points of the game. But that's kind of in the name of the game of Survivor. You are playing the game for yourself and to get to the end on your own. And a lot of players, some of the best, will take any advantage that they can to get there. Chappies for me has got a very interesting edit. So I do agree with Chris. He's been outsmarted on a few occasions as well. He hasn't always controlled the vote necessarily, but the edit is telling me he still has a chance if he gets to the end. And I don't know, what do you think, Riley? Do you think Chappies is becoming that person that everybody now wants to take to the end of the show, but potentially when he gets there, he proved tonight that he's pretty effective in speaking at Tribal Council and turning the target away from him as well? Will he potentially be able to get into that final Tribal Council with more of a case than what people in the game actually appreciate he potentially has going into that final?
Oh, I'm not sure people will still want to take him to the end. I mean, he's definitely made a lot of enemies on this Austin Dealey camp. And I don't think anyone really wants to play all that long with him. And also because they probably consider him a threat still at Final Tribal Council. And again, if they let Santoni fly by as well and remain in the game, and Chappies wins a couple of immunities, he might be able to skate by and bring her to the Final Tribal Council as well. I still think he has a chance to win. I wouldn't say it's the biggest chance. I'd say maybe against someone like a Nicole or an Anella, he might be able to win. Kiran and Tyson would definitely be 2 people who have a better case on the jury than Chappies. But in this Tribal Council especially, we've got a lot of it was really on Chappies' side the whole time. Nico was on Chappies' side the whole time,
Exactly.
and Wider was really being cast as a villain in this instance, and being cast as a bit selfish, whereas they almost recognised that Chappies was almost beating the game, and they cast the hero edit on him. So it was interesting to see that, because you're right, we have been seeing a lot of positive Chappies content that I wouldn't be surprised if he still wins the game. I think I'm still thinking I'm looking at Tyson to win in the end, but it is going to be interesting if he gets to the end to see, how he goes about the final tribal council. The big question is, will the jury be bitter or not?
Yeah, and I think, Jake, maybe the reason we're seeing this positive, like Riley says, I'm not willing to count Chappies out. I was lower on Chappies' chances a few rounds ago when Anesu was still in the game, when the Renier was still in the game, when Amy was still in the game, because some of them had really good edits as well, and I thought they potentially could still be underdogs to also go through and win the game. But, is the reason that they're still painting Chappies in this positive light and they're giving him this hero edit maybe the fact that they just knew that with Chappies they've got TV gold, they need him back for a future season, and they don't want to burn him because they want to go back to him in the future if he doesn't win this season to say, Chappies, will you play an all-star season when we get to season 10?
Yeah, see, I'm with you, Chris. I like discussing the edit, and especially with South Africa, they are very interesting with their edits. When you look at US, a lot of people talk about, oh, so obvious, that person has the winner's edit, like Tony and Winners at War. Everyone said it was too obvious. And this season of Australian Survivor, a lot of people are saying it's a bit too obvious with certain someone. And, I felt that way last week with Anesu. I was like, oh man, so obvious, Anesu. And before that, I was like, oh, so obvious. Renier or Amy, so obvious. Nope. Got that swept right under me. So with Chappies, I mean, it could mean anything. It really could. Like, I think it's perfectly plausible that they are trying to edit him in a positive light because he wins, or they're just like, this guy's hilarious. We got to show him. And, maybe they just wanted to bury Warda because why not? And they had to make Chappies seem like he was in the right, even though what he did was, not really that heroic. But it could really mean anything. I wouldn't be surprised either way.
Yeah, so we've got a lot of love here in the chat for Chappies and Santoni, saying that they would love to see a Santoni Chappies final two. I don't think they both get there. I think Santoni is going to get sniped before Chappies before the end. Personally, is what I think is going to happen. I could be wrong. Have got absolutely zero things to go on here, but I've just got a feeling that they're not both making it to the end. Dolores says that she's indifferent when it comes to Santoni and that she is borderline at times. And I think when it comes to Santoni, it is quite interesting because, again, in this episode, Riley, we see that Santoni is someone that takes a lot of offense to people not including her in a plan, someone that doesn't want to sort of look after her throughout the game. Kiran makes the choice here at the auction when he buys himself out. What a booby trap of a auction to bet on, and then he has to give his money to someone. He chooses to give his money to Warda, and Santoni takes a real offense to that. And this has been a sort of trend for Santoni. Like, I personally love Santoni. I think she's a great, vibrant character. She's definitely not boring to watch play this game, but I think that if people kind of feel borderline about her, they probably feel like she's a little bit entitled sometimes within these situations where she doesn't get chosen, where she takes it extremely personal. And I think that's maybe where people are sort of on the fence with her.
Yeah, and we've seen that time and time again with Santoni playing a very emotional game. She gets burnt by someone, she's going to ride it all the way to the end and try and get them out. And in this episode, Wider was public enemy number one for her. And right from the get-go, coming back from Tribal Council when Anesu was voted out, she was determined to get Wider out of the game. She was determined because Wider was complacent about her position within the game. And the fact that they were, so nonchalant about voting Anesu out, one of Santoni's closest allies in the game, and only allies, mind you. But yeah, she does play a very emotional game. She doesn't want anyone to take her game into their hands. She wants that self-determination within the game, and she's done a great job so far. But as we've said, she's played this role of the swing vote throughout the game, flip-flopping from vote to vote. but she hasn't created those core alliances. So a lot of people are getting pissed off with her, which, doesn't bode too well for her chances to win.
100%. And, on that note of playing an emotional game, like you quite rightfully said there, she wanted to target Warda because she felt like Warda was being insincere in regards to the fact that Warda was struggling with the fact that she needed to vote Inesu out at that point, which, funny enough, I had a conversation with Warda last night, which will be available tomorrow in the exit interview. And we go into this specific scenario and how Warda said, for her, it was a tough decision. I don't want to spoil in regards to why it was a tough decision to vote for Inesu out, but it seems sincere. But, Warda going through this struggle, Santoni makes it her personal story, and she gets offended by this and really makes an emotional decision here to go after Warda in this spot. Jake, do you think that, when it comes to the game of Survivor, making an emotional decision isn't always the smartest thing to do? Do you think they potentially missed an opportunity here to get rid of Kiran or Tyson, who potentially, I think Riley is right, are the two biggest threats at the moment in regards to their resumes to win the game? And also, Kiran has won quite a few immunities. It could be a big challenge for Chappies, who pretty much needs to win out from here on out now, going into the final stages of the game. Do you think that this move was a good one or not?
I don't think it was good. I saw a comment on Reddit that said this might be the missed the shot that you should have taken moment of the season. If Kieran or Tyson, like you said, Kieran, he's won 2 immunities. He won the first 2, I believe.
Yeah.
He could give Chappies a run for his money. You saw this episode, Tyson gave him a run for his money. This could be the biggest regret of Chappies' game. If he's in the end with with either of them, not only do they have, more to be proud of, in my opinion. I think Chappies has played a lackluster game as much as I love him. But I feel like they haven't burnt as many people as he has. And, Chappies has Inesu and, in this scenario, Santoni on the jury. But I'm really not sure anyone else is very high on him. And I think Warda, I will say it was good to at least take one of the 3 out, because those 3 were pretty tight. And it's a shame Chappies didn't know about this kind of secret 3 trio of Anela, Kieran, and Tyson. I don't know. We don't really know if they're being completely sincere, Kieran and Tyson, to Anela. But I do think that they would have been able to take him to the end, and definitely I don't think Anela was getting much votes in that scenario. And by the way, do we know if this is a final 2 or 3 for sure? Or
myself and Riley just spoke about that prior to the live, and we're uncertain at this point if it is going to be a final 2 or a final 3. But I'm leaning towards a final 3 just based on the amount of people we'll have on the jury moving into the game. But one of the things I wanted to bring up here is that we speak about the emotional gameplay from Santoni, but we also have to be fair. There's a lot of emotional gameplay here from the 3 people that are in power this round as well. Kiran, Warda, and Tyson get very emotional about the fact that, and it's understandable, you're out there on the island, someone takes your food, someone take your resources, you're going to get pretty peeved off by it. But what I found really interesting, Riley, and what I want to know is this a part of Chappies' gameplay before going into an immunity challenge where he is making it clear that he is stealing food? He doesn't care about hiding his tracks. We hear early in the episode that he's been doing this for a long time. He's been, every 2 days, he's been taking a little bit of rice every time, put it in his bag, eating a little bit more than the others. So he clearly did it in a very stealth way until this point. So a lot of people are looking at this and say, horrible gameplay by Chappies, super bad social gameplay by him. But why make it obvious at this point that you're doing it? I think he did it to rile them up. I think, in sport, there's this whole thing that you do where you get into someone's psychology, into their mental mindset before they go into a challenge, where they get that annoyed by you or that flustered by you that they're not focusing on the win. And I feel like, if Chappies gets to the end and if he can pitch this to the jury in the sense that it was a part of his gameplay and a part of making them upset and not focused on the game and becoming a bit more emotional here, that he potentially could still have a case to turn this around on a jury where they might still look at him as some sort of a mastermind.
Yeah, and of course, Chappies and Santoni had the tribal council pass and the idol in their pocket, so they had all the ammunition to create as much havoc as they wanted. And yeah, in this instance, it may well have been that Chappies was starting to try and roll up the tribe. Look, I'm not sure how much of that is true, but certainly that he certainly burnt a lot of players in the game. It almost reminds me of Taylor Lee Stocker on Survivor Millennials vs Gen X, how he had his little food stash, and that was ultimately the impetus that saw him being voted out. But look, in Chappie's instance, I don't blame him at all. I mean, a smart move to be stealing rice at the night, a very villainous thing to do, but it's clearly helping him in these challenges because he's just dominating from time and time again.
He's a massive Australian Survivor fan as well. Obviously know who Luke Toki is and David Gennard and all those guys. And, you've seen some of those players steal rice at nighttime and then using it as a way to build allegiances with other players. But Chappies went the opposite direction where he was like, I'm just going to try and benefit myself as much as I can in the game and get any kind of leg up on the rest of the competition, going into that specific challenge. I want to roll it back a little bit and talk about the auction. The auction is something that we don't see very often anymore in Survivor, especially in the US. It's something that the international show still sometimes has. Jake, as someone that hasn't seen the auction in a while, or potentially you would have seen it when you did the rewatch on Island of Secrets as well, what was your take on this auction and how it played out ultimately with the rewards that were up for grabs and the food and everything? Did you like this auction? Do you have any thoughts on it?
I thought it was great. I always love seeing the auction, and I think we definitely took it for granted when it was in pretty much every season. And there's just something about seeing hungry people just go crazy over, like a plate of sweets, like Chappies. It's just entertaining. And that's what first and foremost, I love, the entertaining aspect. I of course love the strategy, but it was just nice to see it again, and I definitely enjoyed it.
Oh, that's awesome. And I mean, Nicole here, Riley, I mean, if there was ever a person who had a great auction and won everything, it was Nicole, right?
Yeah, it reminded me a lot of Shane Gould, Australian Survivor, and I do like this, beggar's plate idea, how they get part of every single reward. And in this instance, even when people didn't bid on anything, she got the benefit of it, like the bath, like the burgers which Wider gave away. So she got plenty out of it. She got very lucky there. I did like also that we didn't see too many advantages go up for grabs. Obviously, we saw Nicole getting the Immunity Island send ticket and Tyson getting the Immunity Challenge advantage. I feel like it was well balanced at that point in the game, that there weren't too many advantages up for grabs. And I was also very happy that everyone seemed pretty hungry to actually buy the sweets or the tapas or whatever was up for grabs. There wasn't too much focus on just holding out to the end for the advantage like we've seen in past US Survivor seasons.
Yeah, and I quite liked, Tyson got an advantage in the immunity challenge, but it wasn't something that was ridiculous. Like, I think we kind of see this a little bit in Edge of Extinction when players come back and they buy these advantages on the edge where they have these massive advantages where they just skip certain sections of the challenge, but it's all in one and there's no stop to the challenges. Like at least in Survivor South Africa, there was a phase 1 and you reset and start together for phase 2 and then for phase 3 and phase 4, right? And from memory in the edge, certain players just had that advantage where they skipped the whole first part of it, but it was all continuous. So it's actually a massive advantage to winning the immunity. I felt this one was quite balanced. Like it was an advantage, but it wasn't a game-breaking advantage as such. Also really like the fact that, Nico, one of the things I like about him as a host, and we'll talk about him again when we get to the tribal council section, but here in the auction as well, feeling very confident to sort of make the rules up as he goes and allowing Kiran to ultimately get his letter from home there at the end and saying, hey, what are you willing to offer me? And allowing Warrior to do it. I like this humane side of Nico and just the fact that he sort of thinks on his feet. I think he's this season, he like similar to what we've seen with Jeff over the years. He's just getting better for me every season that he's out there. And I think we'll talk about this when we get into the Tribal Council, because I thought he had an exceptionally strong performance at Tribal Council when things were going a little bit haywire there as well. Now, Nicole, she ends up going to Immunity Island after the immunity. Let's have a chat a little bit about that and her having to finish this putting the numbers down from 1 to 100 in the time for the sand, I think it was well edited to the point where I thought, man, how's she going to make it? It looked like it was running empty, and she still had a lot to do to get that. And I thought, man, it's been hard for people to actually win it. And she actually says it at the end when she gets the fire immunity idol. It's like most people seem to have lost when they go there, which is one of the things I really appreciate about Immunity Island. It's not just a freebie. You're not just getting given an advantage every single time someone goes out there. So I think it's really worked as a twist. But the fire idol, Jake, what do you think about this fire idol and the fact that if you play it, the two people with the highest votes will have to make fire to stay in the game? And do you think this is going to come into play? I personally think it could be something that ends up saving a Chappies potentially here towards the end of the game, because I think he's going to be superb at making these fires since he's been doing it for so long with the nighttime rice operation that he's had throughout the season.
Yeah, it's really interesting. We see, like you said, with Chappies has the flints in his bag that everyone freaked out about. Definitely has some practice, and I think that Nicole may accidentally save him at some point.
I think so,
because I believe next week is the last opportunity you can play it. She may just say, "Oh, it's the last time. Might as well use it," and then Chappies goes against someone and he wins.
I think she uses it.
Yeah. I mean,
why not? You got to roll the dice. You got to put it on black when you're out there playing the game once. And like gratification says here, how crazy would it be if Chappies wins the immunity next episode and then gives it to Santoni to compete in fire and then wins that? I don't know if Chappies will play to that level, to be honest, but it would be a pretty crazy episode if we see something like that happening, and that's ends up being the thing that saves Santoni, because ultimately Santoni and Chappies made the decision not to save her immunity idol for an extra round, and I think we should probably talk about that as well, because Santoni tried to pitch that to Chappies and say, hey, maybe you should play the Tribal Council pass on me, and then that way they can force that alliance to show their pecking order, because people like Anela would probably see he's not in with the three, and that Warda and Tyson and Karan would have stayed most likely true to each other at that point. So it would have forced Anela to potentially work with Chappies. He could have potentially broken that alliance up a little bit or shown what pecking order is in that alliance. But I think the big one here is they don't have that immunity idol going into the next round. I think for Chappies that's great, because if she had the immunity idol and he doesn't win immunity, he's gone next. So I think it's good that he didn't end up playing the Tribal Council pass potentially on her, because I don't think that Santoni would have played the idol on Chappies. It's too big of a risk to take.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. It's, in theory, you would think they should have saved it. But for Chappies, that's really not that. It doesn't really make that much of a difference, because, like you said, I don't see a world where Santoni, when she is vulnerable, plays her idol for Chappies, even though he would probably be taking the votes.
Yeah, I think they would call their bluff if Santoni did what a certain player in Australian Survivor did this season, saying, hey, I could play the idol for either one of us. I don't think anybody believes that Santoni is not saving herself in that spot so close to the end. The money is too real, you're too close to having the championship. You're not going to play it on the other person and put yourself at risk. So I do think that, in that sense, probably the right move was to rather get Anela gone here and take control of the vote and ensure that someone will go home that isn't either Santoni or Chappies. And I mean, like you said, 4 people immune at this stage, really only making the possibility for 3 people to get voted out here. I think we could be more critical about the fact that they didn't take Tyson and Karan out than what we could be in regards to the fact that they ended up playing the Tribal Council pass in the way that they played it for this episode, even though we know Anela is not going to show any loyalty to them. But, the big thing here is you've got Anela and Nicole, you've got Karan and Tyson, and you now got Santoni and Chappies. There's 3 duos left in this game. So the question is, will Anela automatically go and make a horrible game move and play with Tyson and Kiran towards the end here? Or will he be smart enough here to recognize he's got an opportunity to get some power back in the game and keep Nicole safe with him in the game as well, and rather with Nicole work with Santoni and Chappies? Because, at this point, Nicole has already realized that in the previous episode, on paper, their best bet is to go to the end with someone like a Santoni or a Chappies because they believe they can easily beat those two at the end. Kiran and Tyson, it's not so certain. I feel like there's a very big chance that Kiran or Tyson will be the next person to go next episode. And my money is on Kiran because I think Kiran has played the best game this season so far, but it's not been shown to us. I think Tyson has gotten a lot more of the screen time when Kiran potentially is the... And again, I'm not taking anything away here. I'm sure they work very closely together. But the little bits that I've seen from Kiran, I feel like he's a very good player, but we haven't seen all of it. Riley, you look...
Karan's definitely the more visible threat at this stage. I don't think people view Tyson as the bigger threat of the pair. I mean, Kiran has won, I think, 2 or 3 immunity challenges at this stage. So he's clearly one of the more visible players. And he's been someone that's been bringing up these strategy talks and creating these plans. I do think Anela still has a chance to go to the end with them. I think it's probably the right thing for Anela to go to the end with Kiran and Tyson.
Why?
Simply because if they go to the end, Kiran and Tyson are going to split the vote either way. I think Anela has a lot of favour from the Zamba tribe that the likes of Rhaenyra and Sean may look towards him as, being someone that has the opportunity to win the game. But I don't see him beating Chappies or Santoni at the final tribal council. Depending on how Chappies and Santoni actually, state their game and whether they burnt the jury or not, it would be interesting to see, what sort of combinations go to the end. But for this point in the game, I think Anela's probably his best chances go with Kiran and Tyson, and hope that maybe Chappies wins his way to the end and he can go with, say Anela, Chappies, or one of the two. That might be his best option at this stage. It's again, though, I'm not sure he's in as good a position as a Kiran or a Tyson to win the game, but I think it's definitely his best option to go with those two.
I personally respectfully disagree with you, but I mean, this is usual for me and you. We always have these different takes on it. I don't think that Anela going against Kiran and Tyson, he's gonna get the respect. From having watched some of the Jury Villa sort of footage up until this point, the jury seems to really respect Kiran's game a lot from what I've seen, and then probably second to that Tyson's game of the players that are left in the game. And I don't think the players that are there like Yoda Neves and that are going to vote based on personal alliance and who they were good friends with in the game. I think they're going to vote for the person who actually played the best game when it comes to the end. So I don't think Anela personally has a chance against Kiran and Tyson. I think if I was him, I would roll the dice and take a shot at Chappies not being liked, take a shot at Santoni being someone that made a lot of promises and never fully delivered for people on that other side. And I think Anela, like quite rightfully Brianification said here, doesn't have much of a chance to win the game. I think he's damned if he do, damned if he doesn't at this stage. Just, not saying he's played a bad game, but from what I've heard talking to the people as they come on to the exit interviews, he's played a similar game to Santoni, where he's flipped and flopped between alliances and he was saved quite a lot by different alliances, but he hasn't really been that loyal to anyone specifically in the game. But we've seen less of that on the show. The edit tells me he's not winning this show, basically, from what I've seen. Quite interested to know your opinion on this, Jake. What do you think is the way forward here for an Anela? Do you agree with Ryan, or do you agree with me on this one? You can break the tie this time around.
I personally agree with Chris. I really think that it could be a big part of the episode next week that Anela is like, this is my chance to shake up the game and, take my chances with Chappies, because he may say, oh, they just blasted him at Tribal Council. Maybe if I take him to the end, he's only going to get Anesu's vote. He might try to take the game into his own hands and try to shake things up. And I personally think that, I don't know, I really think that you're right with the damned if he does, damned if he doesn't. I think he's kind of drawing dead at this point, and I think he might know that. So that's why he might try to shake things up.
All right, Jake, you've earned your next spot as a guest appearance on the show by agreeing with me here. Well done. This is why I brought you in. We needed a little bit of that backup coming into this episode. But listen, what do we know? It's going to be tough getting to the end here for all these players. The other player that I'm quite interested at this point is Nicole. Nicole is someone, like I said, she's already verbalized in a previous episode that she would love to sit next to Santoni and Chappies at the end because she thinks she can beat them. I think we saw that for a reason, and that she potentially, now that the numbers are there, she didn't really have much room to move prior to this, even though she got super annoyed with Chappies for taking rice from the camp and having the sweets and all those kind of things. I think she, at this stage, from what I've seen, isn't playing an emotional game, and I think she could potentially lean towards that side as well to try and get to the end. But under no circumstances do I think Tyson is out yet. I think Tyson is still very much in the conversation, and probably the person at this point that has got the best chance of winning, still based on edit, with maybe Chappies second. It's kind of how I see it currently playing out. And for all we know, Tyson becomes the underdog that needs to win his way here to the end if he does lose Kiran as well in the next couple of episodes, which I can't wait to see how that's going to play out. Now, guys, I want to get into the big thing about this episode. Let's get into the fact that Chappies ends up taking some of the sweets from the auction. You know, he takes this, he gets a bit of a sugar rush, tells Nico that he's had no sugar crash, he's going to crash the challenge, and he does it for Anesu at the end, and he does win this. This becomes a massive part of the episode where we go into Tribal Council because, you know, Tyson, Warda, and Karan believed, and probably Anella and also Nicole at this stage, that he had an unfair advantage going into this challenge and that it should be punished. And they were very adamant about this. But we find out that there's a lot more to this story by, you know, Chappies not being the only person that has broken the rules here, and that other people have broken the rules as well. Riley, how did this sit with you? You did mention it was a bit uncomfortable to watch, but it was still one of those things where you couldn't look away. You wanted to see it play out in Tribal Council and to hear all the different arguments coming out. Where do you sit on this currently, and what do you think should have happened here? Do you think that Nico dealt with this in an appropriate way?
Well, I think it's more an instance of production not getting involved earlier. Certainly, if Wider and the likes were starting to make complaints before the immunity challenge about Chappie stealing all the sweets, then perhaps they should have said to production, you know, hey, this is going on. Is this allowed? And potentially, you know, production could have spoken to Chappies in that instance and, you know, clear things up a little bit. But it certainly doesn't help that that the likes of Nicole and Anella and I think it was Tyson brought back Bri to the camp and shared that with the camp. So they certainly didn't help their own case at all. It was a bit of a double standard. I almost do like that Nico does sit back a little bit and just lets the players play their own game, doesn't get too involved. I do like that aspect of it. But yeah, I mean, if Chappies is able to do it without getting in trouble, then sure, why not? I mean, it certainly helped him to, you know, win immunity in this instance and create a lot of havoc. I mean, he was just, you know, I think it was such a good move by Chappies to recognize he was on the bottom and just to increase his target ever so much more that, you know, everyone was so focused on getting Chappies out. Obviously, Chappies and Santoni having this arsenal in their pocket to take out one of the opposing alliance. It was a great move from him to, you know, really amplify his target. It might tank his game a little bit, but certainly put all the focus on him. So it almost did create another enemy for him in Wada.
Yeah, I mean, I think that personally, Jake, you know, Nico for me, like I said, just someone that continues to improve season after season. I've always liked Nico, but I mean, I'm really getting into how he deals with these tribal councils, how he basically, like Riley said, let everything play out, let everybody state their case, asking Warda, what do you want to happen? You know, really getting them to sort of lead the conversation, and they just pretty much blabber all of it out. I think, you know, a lot of people gave a lot of heat here for Warda and Tyson and Kiran for having a go at them, and I saw online that, you know, Warda had to defend in some of the comments that are being made, you know, towards her online about the fact that she's a hypocrite and all these kind of things. I think, you know, for me personally, I don't blame them for trying to get the immunity taken away from Chappies at this point. I mean, Warda was fighting for her life in the game at this point, right? So you're going to try and throw anything at the wall and see what sticks. And yes, obviously they got found out for breaking the rules as well. I think the angle that they came out with this here was that when they did it, it was to the benefit of the whole tribe, and they shared it with everyone, where Chappies was being a little bit more selfish and sort of stealing the food and using it himself. Overall, where were you sort of sitting on this? And, you know, do you think that it's a legitimate game move to bring this types of conversation into a tribal council? We've never had something like this happen before, where I've seen it blow up in a tribal council where someone has potentially stolen fruit from a reward where they shouldn't have, and it being used as something that potentially they could get stripped off their immunity idol, like you would strip an Olympian off their gold medal if they were to be found for drugs at an Olympic sport.
Yeah, it's like Crystal Cox
Yeah.
all over again. See, this is why I loved it. I feel like it's very, like Riley said, uncomfortable. It's like, yeah, Chappies did, it was purely for himself. He didn't give anything away to anyone else. And you can argue, it's that matters. You can argue that it doesn't matter. Like Nico said, the bottom line is they all broke the rules. And now it's tricky. I don't blame them. I don't blame the trio for trying to do something, and you got to understand they're pissed that he's stealing rice, and not only that, but and they're just pissed that he won the immunity challenge, and they're upset that they know that Santoni has an idol and that they probably won't be able to get either of them out. So they had to try something, and I don't blame them for trying, but I did kind of have a problem with the way that Tyson was speaking to Chappies. I get it. I would be upset too if I were in his position, but he was just swearing at him over and over again, and it did make me a bit uncomfortable, but I can't blame him for trying.
It's a good point you bring up there, because one of the things about Chappies, he's been attacked throughout the season at various occasions, right? This has not been the first time where people have come at him. And one thing about Chappies that I do respect and admire is his ability to remain calm and never loses his cool in those moments, and I really respect that from him. For me, Chappies is a player that doesn't play with his emotions. And, the fact that he went out of his way, I'm putting it out there. I know Riley doesn't think that he played it at that level. I think Chappies knew what he was doing, stealing that rice and leaving the pot out there for everybody to find the next day. He's been doing this for weeks without anybody knowing that he's doing it. Why change your strategy last minute? It's to piss people off. He knew what he was doing. He knew he was going to get a reaction out of them. He knew that they were going to be emotional about it. And like you quite rightfully said, Tyson has been a bit of a game bot throughout this whole season, Riley. I think we've been saying for a long time, like Tyson's playing a really, really good game. No one's taking that away from him. He is the idol king. Him and Kiran Sam together, they're very strong. But the one problem that I think we've had is we haven't seen the emotional side to him, and he lets that sort of slip for a split second this episode, where you see the humane part of him, which I really liked seeing that part of him. Maybe the swear words weren't great, and I'm sure if you talk to Tyson afterwards, he would regret it and feel bad that he did that on national TV or international TV now that it's around the world, and it's outside of his normal character. But Survivor makes you do some crazy things, right?
Yeah, I did like that Tyson, he said at Tribal Council, the whole time in this game I've been playing the game, basically, and I haven't really been too invested emotionally and personally in it. And this time he stepped away from that and, certainly made his case heard at Tribal Council there. Again, it was very uncomfortable sitting there and watching them just go at it from both sides. And I do like that Nico didn't intervene at all. He just sat back and just let them fight, which is, I think great in that instance, not to intervene and direct the questions, but rather just let them argue between themselves and call each other out on their own misdemeanors and their faux pas, so to speak, and let them fight between themselves. I thought it was a great move by Nico just to let them fight. But on Chappie's part, a great move again to steal that bag of rice out of Whiter's bag. And, had Whiter been voted out with that bag of rice, I think it would probably reflected poorly on the likes of Tyson. Although, as we learned, Whiter did give some of the rice to Tyson, so he was keeping some of that at least. But certainly that could have put Chappies in a heroic light had she been voted out and that hadn't been revealed, and he'd come back with a bag of rice and said, well, look, I'm still here for the tribe. She's stolen our supply. and it'd be selfish of her to go out, and leave us to starve for the next however many 10 days.
Now, seeing Chappies go out there and doing this vote while he's shouting, Operation Destiny, this one's for you, Anesu, I was living for it. Like, I mean, this is just the classic tribal council voting, one of the best, voting speeches as you do it. It reminded me of the one where Randy gets voted out in Gabon, where you get that. I can't remember if it was Sugar. Was it Sugar who was screaming it as well as she was voting Randy out of that one? Just absolutely loved it. And I think this is the reason why Chappies has been one of my favorites this season. The guy is excellent TV. So, regardless on if he wins this show or not, like I think if he wins, I don't want to see personally winners come back and play in All-Stars. I think whenever you do that, you waste the spot because people are going to vote winners out as soon as they can in a non-full winner returnee season. And in some ways, it's kind of like bittersweet. I want him to win. Like anybody else, there's not many people that are left in the game that I would, if any, that I would be angry at winning this show. I think everybody has played a really good game. But, if Chappies ends up winning the season, it's kind of would be bittersweet because I'd love to see him come back and play in another season of Survivor South Africa. Jake, who's been your, and myself and Riley won't talk too much about who we think, and it's actually, Riley, changing for me on the day-to-day as some players have gotten stronger and stronger as the season has continued in regards to who I want to come back. But Jake, who do you like from the season? We know we've spoken a lot about Chappies and Santoni as probably being two people we'd love to see come back and play the show again. Do you have other people that you've seen this season that you've been impressed by that you'd love to see come back and play another season if they do an all-star season?
I'll give a pre-merge. I really liked Carla. I thought she was fun. I would love to see her come back, and that's what I kind of liked about Australian Survivor All Stars is they brought back some pre-merge people. Even some of them were a little iffy choices, but people like AK coming back. I really liked that. So I would like to see Carla back. That would be fun, and of course, Chappies and Santoni are my favorites. I would also love to see Anesu or Amy come back too, but I liked Carla. I kind of forgot about her, but I was just thinking back, and I really enjoyed her time on the show.
We also have Brinification here saying that Santoni lawyering for Chappies was brilliant at the end there when it came to the rice, and saying that, the rice was a tribe rice. It wasn't hers personally, so he was allowed to actually take it out of her bag. One of the things we didn't address in the show here before we go into the draft picks and what's left in the game is the fact that obviously they go through the bags here and they found the tribal council pass even before they go in there. Why do players still hide advantages in their bags? Like, I mean, even a person like Chappies who's watched other Survivor seasons before going into the season, he made the mistake of leaving it there. I just don't get it. I know that, Riley, previously in Survivor South Africa, there was a rule that you could steal an advantage, even if you know where it's hidden, you can take it. But that rule's changed since season 4, I think, or season 5 from Survivor South Africa, where now somebody hides the idol against somewhere and somebody just stumbles upon it magically and they get it. They're not allowed to take it, and producers will tell them to put it back there. Why would someone hide it in their bag? And do you think it's a little bit of a mistake here?
Oh, does that not support your theory that Chappies was stealing the rice the whole time to create more of a target? And by hiding the tribal council pass in his bag, again, it creates more of a target on him. It's, I don't think it's a bad thing at all, to create that uncertainty. Look, I don't think Chappies played the tribal council pass right in this instance. I definitely would have played it for Santoni. And that way let them, create divisions amongst themselves. Wada was clearly the one that was going to be voted out just based on how abrasive she was being at tribal council. I think Karan and Tyson probably would have flipped on her. But certainly I think, by hiding it in his bag, and I don't think he wanted them to find it, but at least it did amplify his target potentially. But it was interesting to see because they didn't really react all that well to it. But yeah, I'm not a fan of people raiding each other's bags and stealing advantages or, looking at advantages, what people have in the game. I think it should, potentially be something that's a little bit more precluded from the rules of Survivor. But yeah, I mean, it did create great moments at Tribal Council though. Obviously lots of explosions regarding regarding Chappies stealing the sweets and the rice.
Now, Riley, was there anything else you wanted to get into before we go into who's left in the game and do our power rankings for this week? Is there anything that we missed out on before we go into this?
Well, certainly I think it's good to discuss what's going to happen with the fire idol next week. I think it's going to be very entertaining.
Yep.
In my mind, if Nicole has the fire idol and neither Chappies or Santoni win immunity, obviously put the votes on Santoni. That's going to be your best option because Chappies is probably going to run away with it if they do go to fire. Although, in retrospect, potentially Inela could be an option to make fire. I'm not sure how good he is at making fire, but it will be interesting to see, if they go head to head, how that goes down. Because it's going to be a very interesting twist to bring into the game if it's played, to see what happens. Although it may well serve to be Chappie's advantage.
Also, just I had to remove Andrew from the chat, who was spamming quite a bit and started going into spoiler territory for season 41. And if I hear the word spoiler, I will remove you from the chat because we don't want people to be spoiled if they're watching this as well. I've got absolutely no idea what happens in season 41, and I don't know if spoilers are out there or not, but definitely don't want anybody to be putting any spoilers on the chat there. I agree with you. And one of the other things about Chappies as well, Jake, is he could still equal the record for immunity wins if he goes on an immunity run. He's had 2 immunities in a row now. Rob has got the record for 5, and there's still 3 more immunity challenges leading into the end here, so he could still equal that.
Yeah, he definitely could, and I wouldn't be surprised if he did. And I did want to mention something. I want to know your guys' opinion on what Chappies might have been trying to do with sending Inela back to camp. Do you guys think that he might try to make a play with Inela, like try to have a conversation with him, maybe like, they were going to vote you out if I didn't send you back to camp. They're not with you. I saved you, blah, blah, blah. I'm a bit curious because it does kind of seem like the obvious play is to send Santoni. So I feel like he must have been doing something there. And I'm a bit curious what you guys think.
I think it's interesting because Kiran kind of covered his tracks really well, going to Inela beforehand and telling Inela, listen, you're going to be sent back to camp. And he kind of let him in on the plan. And he said, it's most likely going to be a case of them wanting to get your vote the next round. And then Tyson said it's quite funny because he saved Chappies earlier and Chappies is not loyal to him now. So how can he expect Inela to be loyal based on that move? So I don't know if that's going to work. I personally think the best move for them, if they were to approach Inela here in the next round, is to say, you've got a better chance at winning against me. I would hope that Chappies plays up the card that he can't win it if he gets to the end, and that he sort of sells himself as being a goat, getting to the end, being dragged to the slaughter here to get to the end. I think that's the game move to go ahead. One of the other things here, and also Chris Dixon is saying, great theory to your sort of analysis there on what potentially happened with Inela being sent away. One of the other things as well is a question here by Dolores is, will the fire be between Santoni and Chappies? I don't know if they've got the votes to split it in such a way. I feel like it will be opposing alliances that will most likely face off. Like if I had money on this one, I reckon Chappies loses the next one. He's not going to win all of the immunities in a row. And I've got a theory that Kiran and Chappies might be the 2 people going up against each other in fire here. And Tyson potentially could finally win an immunity. I mean, Tyson has been on the firing line for so long, like to the point where he was shocked when he didn't get any votes this round. I think like most of us were very, very shocked when he didn't get votes coming his way. So it'll be interesting to see how that's going to play off. Now, let's get into the remaining players that we've got left in the game here as we get to the pointy end of the game. For the first time in a not the first time in a while, but again, we're back to a draw. Who would have thought, Riley, when we first started this draft picks and we did our draft picks in the beginning of the season, that we would be going into the final 6, 3-3, pretty tight. Very, very difficult to know where it's going to go here in the end. And I think there's still a few players, like I think Tyson and Chappies, 2 people I think that are the obvious potentials here to win. But it's my number 1 guy pick and your last guy pick looking like they're the 2 guys coming into this last round that potentially could win it.
Yeah, and again, Kiran, I wouldn't count him out either. But certainly, it seems like he's the more visible threat of the 2, so the more likely one to be sniped out. Santoni as well, she has a slim chance to win at the end, I think. But again, it's looking unlikely for her, just with how she's burnt the jury. But certainly, as we said with Drew last week, if she can really state her case and say, the fact that she's been playing on the bottom from day one, she hasn't had a single ally in the game other than Chappies, and she managed to fight her way all the way to Final Tribal Council, despite being perceived as the weakest member on the old Vuna tribe. It would be a legitimate case for her to present and might get her some favor from the jury. But yeah, at this stage, I'd be looking between Tyson and Chappies to win. Nicole and Anela, you can probably count them out at this stage, just because, the old Vuna players have played such a high level of gameplay at this point that I feel like, they're clearly the ones that are dominating the game, leading the strategy at this point.
Yeah, who would have thought Vuna would, end up, in the preseason, Zumba was running all over them until they made that move at the merge to save Chappies. Brilliant move. Could be the winning move for Tyson, saving Chappies at that point, even though you can't stand him right now, was the right move to make. So if we had to go, and Riley will give you an opportunity to think about this, if we had to go and rank our top 4 players here, let's do the top 6. There's enough of them. I would rank Tyson number 1 going into this last round. I still think Tyson is going to win the show. I would put Chappies at number 2. I would put Santoni at number 3. I would put Kiran at number 4. Then I would put it's tough. It's very tough between Nicole and Anela. I'll just go probably, and no, actually I'll go Nicole 5 and I'll go Anela 6 at this point. It's tough to make that case, but I think that Nicole has got a better chance with the friends and the connections she's made on the game, that she potentially could still do well. Warda and Nicole got pretty close before she was voted out as well. So I feel like, I don't know why, I just feel like Anela, he's played the same game as Santoni, but we haven't seen it. And there has to be a reason for that in my mind. Jake, what would your rankings be here?
I'd have, Tyson 1, Chappies 2, Is this on who's most likely to win?
Yeah.
Yeah. Santoni 3, Karen 4, Nicole 5, Anela 6. So I believe that's the same as yours.
Same as mine. Yeah. Riley, do you have a similar take, or do you want to swap some things around?
I might swap Kiran and Santoni around. I might put Kiran number 3, Santoni number 4.
That's fair.
But between Nicole and Anela, I think it's a tough choice. Again, I might put Nicole above Anela in that instance. I think the reason for me putting Kiran higher than Santoni at this point, Santoni has played such an abrasive game that she's not going to have too much favor from the jury in that instance. So I think she lags a little bit in that department there. But for Santoni, I think someone that could potentially, get a lot of criticism from the jury for her moves throughout the game.
Yeah, as you guys would have seen there, the poll is 56% of people still think that Chappies has got an opportunity to win this game. So it's very 50-50. And I want Chappies to make the final because I want to see him make a case to a jury. Like, I reckon it will be entertaining to see him make a case to win this season. And
I think he can make the final. If he keeps winning immunity, then, no question he'll be there. 3 more immunity wins and he's in the final 3. Or potentially, even if there's a fire-making twist, I wouldn't rule that out at this stage. At the final 4, it could be something that comes up, like in Heroes vs. Healers vs. Hustlers, when that was first sprung as a surprise. Maybe people will cry wolf in that instance and say that Chappies is a new Ben Driebergen and production wanted him to win. But I'll tell you what, I wouldn't be complaining if Chappies wins at this point. He's played such a strong game so far. And really, he has been on the bottom from day one, basically. He was blindsided on that Pinty vote. And ever since then, he's been, on the bottom ever since, really. Going back to the swaps tribe at Zumba, with Amy flipping on him and him being on the bottom. He's worked his way from the bottom and he's still fighting despite being the biggest threat in the game. It's great to see him, continuing to go from strength to strength. Even though a lot of people are pissed off with him, he's still standing.
100%. I've got a very hot take here. I know both Riley, you and Jake are both big fans of Fabio. Dural was someone that he was compared to in this episode where they said, you're going to be Dural. If you get to the end, you're going to get no votes. Could he be the first Fabio-esque winner if he does go to the end here and he actually ends up winning it, and he talks about his pregnant wife at home, similar to how Fabio spoke about his mother that gave him this inspiration? We know there's that connection about both Renier and Chappies having pregnant wives at home. I feel like we potentially saw that for a reason at that point, and we got to see a confessional from him about leaving his pregnant wife at home when he went out there to go play the game. Could that potentially come back, and could we see a very emotional Chappies, which we already see there's going to be an emotional Chappies in the next episode? Could that play into the jury's decision making here at the end? And could we see someone that's similar to Fabio, didn't always control the votes, but won his way to the end and got key advantages at certain times, win this game? And would he be very similar to a Fabio type winner, Jake?
I think that's an interesting comparison. I don't know if I would.
The social game's different. The social game's different for sure.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't have the same. Because Fabio is, and this is something I've said before. Fabio is actually a superb social player, but I mean similar in the sense that Fabio didn't have a lot of agency or control the direction at certain times within the game, but still got to the end and got the vote and still managed to get across. If that makes sense. Yeah,
I would say that's definitely possible. That that happens and that he could become. Well, actually, I don't think I've seen the first couple South African seasons. Maybe he'll be the first Fabio survivor, South African Fabio. But I do think that's definitely could happen where he makes the final 2 or 3, and he brings up his wife back at home. Because I think what the play is that he just needs to show that he's not a malicious guy. They were trying to paint him as like, oh, you're pathetic, you're a disgrace to this game, you're so selfish. He's just trying to get an edge. Isn't that what everyone's trying to do? Maybe not in the same way he is, but everyone's trying to find any possible way to get the advantage on your peers, because it is an individual game. And I think that that's the play for him, is that he needs to show, like, I'm not a bad guy. I just want to win $1 million. So I think that could definitely come up where he brings up his wife and kind of, tugs at the heartstrings, and people are like, wow, this guy, he really cares. And he's just trying to, he was just trying to win the $1 million.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. I don't like the Fabio comparison at all. I think Chappies is more like a Tony, or potentially a Mike Holloway. Might be a good comparison in that instance. But I don't think Chappies has. Look, I reckon Chappies has the votes of Renier at Final Tribal Council, no matter what, I think. And then he's also got Santoni, if Santoni is on the jury, and potentially Nesu as well. I think that's 3 votes you can lock in. And then the rest, I could see someone like Kiran award in a game like that, provided Tyson isn't at Tribal Council against him. I think for Chappies to win, he can't be at Tribal Council with Tyson or Kiran. That's going to be his path to the end. He has to be alongside Santoni, Nicole, and Anella is how he's going to win the game in that instance, because I think he has a couple of assured votes there. I don't like the comparison to Fabio at all. I think Chappies has had a
Chappies is been a lot
more. He's been a lot more aggressive. I liken him more to a Tony Vlachos, or as I said, a Mike Holloway. I think, Chappies has caused a lot of chaos, and he has been on the bottom from day one, but fighting to keep in the game. Yeah. Really, he has had a couple of lucky saves, but I think you have to reward his game, because he has been a very active player and managed to shift the target away from him at every possible vote.
It's interesting because you can't really, because he's got Tony-esque things to him, but there's also things that he doesn't have. He doesn't have the same social game that Tony has again,
so it's very unicorn.
He's a unicorn. Chappies is Chappies, similar to how Santoni is Santoni. Like you're never going to get another Santoni and a Chappies, and in the future we'll be comparing players to Chappies and to Santoni, I think, and say, is that another Chappies, or is that similar to how Luke Toki is Luke Toki and David Gennard is David Gennard? I think he's going to be remembered for a while, and it's been such a great season to see. I did notice here that Larry also gave us his rankings just before we finish here. Santoni number 1, Chappies number 2, Nicole number 3, and then 4, 5, 6, Kiran, Anella, and Tyson. Very hot not take to have Tyson that low, to be honest with you. But I respect all opinions in regards to this. And Brunification says, feels bad for Chappies. He saved Anella and Santoni and gave them time to eat spaghetti. Never enough. That is true. It might come back to him at the end, and he might be able to make a little bit of a case there. Guys, it's been great talking to you. Jake, as always, it's been great having you on the show. We are hoping that we will see you again at some time in the future to talk a bit more about Survivor, and specifically maybe when we do some of this off-season content, it could be good to have a third person in there to talk about a couple of topics that we've got in mind. Looking really forward to the off-season to talk about who would make the first Survivor South Africa All-Star season, which players in Australian Survivor would we most like to see come back and play a second chance season if they haven't come back so far, and many more discussions, tier rankings of winners, tier rankings of seasons and things like that. I think the off-season is going to be really exciting to get into all of the content that we can still dive into. Riley, Snuffed, what do you have going on your other YouTube channel moving forward?
Yeah, certainly. Keep an eye out for how JT Thomas won Survivor Token Chains in the coming days. The first perfect game, a great winner. He may have tanked a little bit in his later seasons, but certainly, a very legitimate winner. I'm almost drawing comparisons to Chappies in that instance. Maybe Chappies is the version of JT from Heroes vs. Villains and Game Changers, the version that JT wanted to be, someone that plays a very chaotic game. But, in this instance, Chappies might get to the end.
Yeah, 100%. So we've got coming up tomorrow in about 24 hours time from now, we'll have Warda's interview come up. It was a really good one. I know I say this every single week, but I feel like Warda is one of those players where we didn't get to see everything that was going on the island while she was playing. And it's really good to get a perspective from her. And she goes into a lot of off the TV show edit things that happen on the show, which I really appreciate and know a lot of fans really appreciate sometimes hearing about that. So definitely give that a listen if you have an opportunity tomorrow. And then on Wednesday in Australia at 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, myself and Riley will be back to talk about the next week's worth of action in Australian Survivor, followed by, again, Survivor South Africa next weekend as well. We should have a previous player back as a guest. We've had 2 weeks of having some of the Reality Pop crew join us here, which has always been great to get a few more fans' opinions as well. But we should have a previous player lined up for next week to come and talk to us again, which I'm very excited about. And also, if you do watch the challenge, we just did our challenge podcast as well about 2 hours ago with Angel Cake and with Chantel Francis as well. So have a listen to that as well. As always, guys, it's been great having you in the live chat. Thank you for being so active and asking great questions as always. And we hope to see you next time on the show. Thanks and goodbye.